Welcome back to Luke's Properties YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to discuss why I think employees fail at rent to rent. I've been looking at all of my successful rent to rent students, and I've also been looking at some of my unsuccessful students. I've been studying their data and studying their behavior. And one thing that's standing out to me is the people that succeed from rent to rent tend to be better at transitioning from an employee mindset to an entrepreneur mindset. They seem to be able to change their behavior quicker and become better entrepreneurs. And as a result of this, they end up succeeding from rent to rent, because building a rent to rent business is entrepreneurship. You're not an employee. You're not working for a company or a business. You are the business. Rather than doing the bare minimum for 8 hours a day, you transition to going above and beyond without any structure. Sometimes you might be working into the evening. Sometimes you might work through your lunch break. Entrepreneurship is completely different to being an employee. And what I've noticed is my most successful rent to rent students transition well into entrepreneurship. And the people who really grasp how to become a good entrepreneur seem to succeed, whereas the people who stay stuck with the employee mindset, well, they don't tend to succeed from rent to rent because they're still set in their ways. They're still set in an employee mindset. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about the key differences between an employee and an entrepreneur, and hopefully after watching this video, your transition from being an employee working a 9 to 5 to becoming an entrepreneur and running a successful rent to rent business becomes a lot smoother because you understand the differences between the two. So that's my goal with this video. So let's get into it. So firstly, I want to discuss the employee mindset. What is the employee mindset? Well, some of the key traits of the employee mindset are that employees wait for permission. So when you work a 9 to 5 job, you tend to follow instructions, you follow order. When you get to work, there'll normally be tasks set out for you by a manager or a founder. And your job as an employee is to follow those instructions for 8 hours a day with maybe a half an hour or hour-long lunch break in between. You turn up to work, you follow instructions, and you wait for permission. You also have to wait for permission to book off some holiday or some time off, for example. You might wait for permission to go for your lunch. So generally speaking, you're quite passive in your role. You're waiting for someone to give you instructions, and you're waiting for permission. Another employee mindset trait is that they need security and stability. That's what a job creates. Knowing how much you're going to make every single month, knowing that if you turn up to work Monday to Friday from 9 to 5 for the whole month, then you're going to get paid a set amount for the time that you've worked, creates security and stability. A lot of people need this. As humans, oftentimes we crave security and stability. We like to know that our bread is buttered. We like to know that we have an amount of money coming in at the end of the month. This creates comfort for us as humans, and this can create a stable lifestyle, a predictable lifestyle. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that can be enough for a lot of people. Another trait of the employee is that they work for a paycheck, which is normally between £2,000 to £2,500 a month, depending on where you are in the UK. But I think that's the average salary. So you trade 40 hours of work for a consistent, predictable paycheck. Very rarely does that paycheck increase. You might get a small bonus here or there. You might get a small pay increase at the end of the year. With some companies, maybe 2%, maybe 3%. But generally speaking, you're going to be working for 40 hours a week, which is around 160 hours for the month. And for that time, you get paid between £2,000 to £2,500 a month. You're trading time for money. When you're an employee, you avoid failure and you avoid risk because none of the risk is on you. When you work for a company, you're not investing capital into the company to get it started. You're not taking a loan out to start a business, to fund the business, to fund payroll. You have no risk because if the business goes bust, you might lose your job, but you're not going to lose all of your initial investment and you're not going to go bankrupt because you don't own the business. So you have no risk. And by having no risk, I guess you could say that you avoid failure, because if you lose your job, you can just go and find another employer that will give you a job. Whereas if you own a business and it goes bankrupt, it can be quite difficult to go and start another business because maybe you've lost all of your capital, maybe you're in bad debt, you can be in quite a bad hole as a failed entrepreneur. Whereas as an employee, you lose your job, you go and apply for another one, someone else would give you a job, right? 9 times out of 10. So as an employee, you avoid failure and you also avoid risk. Now, in contrast, let's look at the entrepreneur mindset. So rather than waiting for permission, as an entrepreneur, you take responsibility. You're not waiting for someone to give you tasks for the day. You set your own tasks, you set your own goals, you set your own deadlines, and you work towards your goals in your own time frame. Rather than needing security and stability like an employee, you embrace uncertainty. You don't actually know when you'll be able to pay yourself when you first start a business. You don't know how many hours you're going to have to work to achieve the desired result. You don't even know if the business will work. You're taking a calculated risk. You're betting on yourself, your vision, your ideas, and you're betting that the market will embrace your service or your product. That's what entrepreneurship is. But you don't have any security or stability. Most entrepreneurs normally put all of their savings into their businesses. I know I did in the beginning. I put all of my money into my rent-to-rent business 7 years ago, and that was everything I had. And I was willing to take that risk because I took a bet on myself and I had confidence in the service. I sensed a gap in the market and I went for it. But I had to embrace uncertainty for the first 2 years. I was making money, yes, but I was still reinvesting back into the business. I was still making mistakes. I was losing money on bad deals. Those first 2 years taught me so much. And in those 2 years, I had to embrace uncertainty and just keep moving forward. Another difference between entrepreneurs and employees is that rather than working for a paycheck like you would in a 9-to-5 job, as an entrepreneur, you build systems for income. So rather than you physically trading time for money, having to go into work and work 8 hours a day for 40 hours a week to make a salary, to make money, as an entrepreneur, you build a service or a product, and then you build systems that create income for you. Rather than you needing to trade your time for money, you build a system that adds value to the marketplace, and as a result of that, creates money because money follows value, and then you get to benefit from that. So your time isn't necessarily linked to your money. You're not working paycheck for paycheck. You do most of your work up front in the first 6 months to 2 years. You build a business, you build systems, and then as time goes on, those systems and employees create income for you. You just have to build the thing in the first place. So you're not waiting for a paycheck. You're building something that pays you whether you go to work or not. And the final difference here between entrepreneurs and employees is that rather than avoiding failure and risk, as an entrepreneur, you learn from failures. So every time you fail, you learn something, and then your skills improve and things become slightly easier. I've made many mistakes along my journey as an entrepreneur, but every mistake I've made, I've learned a valuable lesson, and that lesson has improved my skill. So now, 7 years in, my skill set allows me to run businesses that make money for me, and that's because I've failed many times. So rather than avoiding failure, I've embraced failure, I've learned from failures, and those same failures have improved my skill set and made me a talented and skilled businessman. And once you become skilled, things become easier. You understand how things work, you create more value in the marketplace, and as a result of that, you get paid more. So rather than avoiding failure and risk, I embraced failure and took risks. And because I made that decision and failed multiple times, I learned loads, my skill set improved, and I built a business, a system that makes money for me so that I don't need to go and make money myself as an employee would. So when I think about my most successful rent-to-rent students, they're successful because they transition from an employee mindset to an entrepreneur mindset quicker and smoother than most people. The people who don't succeed from rent-to-rent, they stay stuck in this employee mindset, and then they wonder why they don't succeed, when it's because they haven't got a growth mindset, they've got a fixed mindset, and they've stayed with an employee mindset rather than transitioning over here to an entrepreneur mindset, because this is the mindset you need to succeed when starting a rent-to-rent business. And I think the way rent-to-rent gets marketed sometimes, it might look like it's a get-rich-quick scheme. It might look like everyone can do it. But the truth is, not everyone can do it, because the real challenge is most people aren't just building a rent-to-rent business. They're transitioning from being an employee to an entrepreneur. And this takes some time. This takes practice. This takes having a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. This takes unlearning things that you've learned in the past throughout school, throughout university. It takes unlearning things that your parents might have told you. It takes unlearning all of that and then embracing this new mindset. And that can be difficult for most people, especially if they're set in their ways and for 20, 30 years they've been taught to have this employee mindset. Being an entrepreneur feels completely foreign to them, and I understand completely because they've been practicing how to be an employee from when they started school. And if you've been a certain way for 20, 30 years, it can feel completely alien to then adopt a completely different way of thinking. But it's that transition that separates the people that succeed and the people that don't. This is why it feels uncomfortable when you first start your rent-to-rent business. If you're coming from an employee background, you're learning two things at once. You're learning how to build a rent-to-rent business, but you're also learning how to be an entrepreneur rather than an employee. And this can be a difficult transition, but this is also why it's 10 times more rewarding. Because if you build a successful rent-to-rent business, then you could earn 10 times what the average salary is. You could earn 10k a month, 20k a month from a business that only demands you to work a couple hours a day, rather than working 8 hours a day for someone else and earning between 2 to 3 grand a month. How different would your life be then? So running your own business is so much more rewarding than being an employee, but you don't get to have the security and the stability, especially in the beginning. You don't get to avoid failure and risk. You have to embrace failure and risk. You have to embrace uncertainty, but this is so much more rewarding because of the person that you become along this journey. Not only do you make more money than an employee ever would, but you also grow as a person, as a human. Your confidence grows, your self-esteem grows, because once you've walked this entrepreneurial path, you know you can build a business from something that was started in your mind. You can add value to the market and you can create money from something that started in here. You're not waiting for someone else to pay you. You can think of something, create a business, bring that business to the market, find clients, offer your services to them, add value to them, and as a result, they'll pay you money, which is just an amazing feeling. I think everyone should have this feeling, because once you do, you feel so much more confident and you know that you're never going to go broke, because all you have to do is open your toolbox of entrepreneur tools, create a service, bring it to the market, add value to people, and as a result, you'll get paid. You're never going to go hungry with an entrepreneur mindset. You just have to be willing to unlearn the employee mindset and transition. So the entrepreneur journey is so much more rewarding than being an employee until you're in your 60s. I think why I found this transition easier myself was because I've never really had a proper job. Growing up, I got kicked out of school when I was 13, 14. From there, I started playing football. I did my apprenticeship at Crystal Palace. Things didn't work out there. I played for a few more professional football clubs. I bounced around the lower leagues of semi-professional football. And then by my mid-20s, I had stopped playing football and I was a bit lost. I did the odd job here and there, the odd delivery job. I always had a van, so I would do the odd removal job when I could. I'd do the odd courier job whenever I could. But generally speaking, I'm not one of these people that's had a job since they left school or university. I never really had a career in mind other than being a professional footballer, which was my first dream. I didn't really have a clear path in the employee world. I never really liked being told what to do. That never really sat well with me. I always had so many ideas, so many plans, and fitting into this employee mindset never really sat well with my gut, my intuition. And in hindsight, now that I'm an adult, I know it was because I've always been an entrepreneur, not an employee. So because I never went through school or university, I learned to think like an entrepreneur earlier than most. Because throughout my 20s, even though I was playing part-time football, I still had to think of ways to make extra money. I would buy and sell whatever I could. I had a short career buying and selling watches. I would buy and sell trainers, sneakers online. I would buy and sell whatever I could to make a profit. So I learned to think like an entrepreneur throughout my 20s, earlier than most, because I didn't have a job or a career to fall back on. So I had to figure things out myself. So that's why I think I find being an entrepreneur more natural, because I've kind of been one for nearly half of my life now. And I wanted to make this video because I didn't realize how hard that shift is for others until I started studying my successful students and then studying some of my unsuccessful students. And I was trying to work out exactly why some people succeed and why some people fail. And I think it has a lot to do with the shift from being an employee to becoming an entrepreneur. So if you can shift your mindset then rent to rent business becomes 100 times easier because you're more well prepared, you understand what it takes, you deal with problems and obstacles better, and you're more well equipped to become a successful business owner with the entrepreneur mindset rather than the employee mindset. If you are an employee trying to transition to becoming an entrepreneur, then just make note of this. Try and forget the employee mindset and try and adopt the entrepreneur mindset, because it will serve you well and it will make you more successful. If you're trying to build a successful rent-to-rent business, then this is a transition that you have to make if you want to succeed. Now, if you want me to help you build a successful rent-to-rent business, then I'll put a link in the video description below. Click the link and you'll be able to book in a call with myself. On that call, we can have a conversation, work out if we'd be a good fit for each other and whether I'd be a good mentor for you. If not, then just keep watching my YouTube videos and copy what I'm doing, copy what my successful students do, and I'm sure you'll succeed. I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. And as always, I'll see you on the next one.